ahead.
Thanks.
Okay. So yeah, this session today is a little different than what I thought it was going to be a couple of days ago. But this panel discussion came up that I think is it should be shocking a lot of people, especially at the government levels. I know the UK already has a champion in the government at the ministerial level that is making AI a priority from I'm hoping it's not just, I really get the impression it's not just saying, oh, we have to make sure that we're ahead of everybody else with AI, but as a cautionary voice as to some of the risks that we're looking at.
Oops.
Okay. And Hugh, where are you located?
I am in New York. I am
Oh,
in New York. And I'm just trying to get on properly because I'm having a problem with my camera. So I'm going to join back in shortly.
okay. Okay, so we're just waiting a couple of minutes. Give 2 more minutes to some of the latecomers because um, I want to properly introduce this session because I think it's going to be important to really understand what we're trying to do with this session and what makes it different from a lot of the other sessions that we've done, so that they'll be able to, if they join us, um, um, if they join us later and miss that, I think they may have some difficulty understanding what we're doing, and then their contributions may not be um, as ideal to what we're trying to accomplish here. Okay. Yes, Mark Henry.
Bill, while we're in this period of waiting, I just wanted to ask that as you're structuring the meeting, if you could take maybe like 15 minutes as well to give us a bit more depth on the new developments you're mentioning in Gemini, because I know we're mainly supposed to discuss this video, and you even gave us questions to guide our discussion, but it would be good to find out a bit more about these new developments in Gemini. Thank you.
Okay, it's not just Gemini. It's really across the board. We've got ChatGPT 5.5, which has really on the some of the agentic scores has really raised the bar to a new height. We've got a number of things that have come out in with regards to Claude, and it's really, we can say, everywhere. It's moving just so fast.
It's proliferated, huh? No, I just picked Gemini because I thought you must have looked at it all and thought, okay, so this is now the apex of it.
No,
But I think
actually here,
all of us would benefit from having just a lay of the land.
yeah. And I'll mention here because I know we've talked a lot about education. So I'm going to make say a couple of things that I discovered about where I think education is going to go, especially because we're seeing right now a real pushback. A lot of school districts in the United States are wanting to go back to paper and pencil. There's a movement among some parents. I almost call it an anti-technology move, and some of the school boards are reacting to it. And of course, it's going to be very interesting because they're looking at today and not thinking about tomorrow, where we're going to be in 2, 3, 5 years. And this is really crucial. And we see entire countries, Scandinavia, which was a leader in providing digital education support, as really backing off and reducing their digitalization of schools. Anyway, I'll say a couple of words, but it's now time. So, ding, I'm Bill. Oh, yes, Hugh.
A quick question. Will this recording be available? Because I'd really like to share this with my club members
Yes.
who are not able to be with us today.
Okay. Yes. No. I will make it available. I do save them sometimes here because some of our meetings have gone over 3 hours, and I know not a lot of people are going to watch a 3 hour. So I sort of been looking for a tool that will let me compress the videos to just pick out the main points. I think we're very, very close to that, by the way. But I do make them all. They're all on YouTube, and I'll
Okay.
just provide the links to them then.
Thank you very much. I'll
Okay.
be on the side listening.
Okay, great. Ding. I'm Bill Graham. I'm the president of the Rotary Dare to Be Great Global eClub, the go-to place for those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world, the whole world, and daring enough to try. Today's meeting would have normally been a continuation of the last two meetings where we discussed what would be the most valuable thing that we could do for the world at this stage right now. And we concluded that more important than any individual problem, be it hunger or poverty or any specific problem, is engagement. The Secretary General had pointed out already before 2020. 2020, as we know, was the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. And sorry about that, guys. I'm not in my normal room right now because I can't make it up the stairs. But so we just have to bear a little bit with this. It'll be over in very shortly. Okay, so the Secretary General was pointing out that the number one problem that was taking place in the world was the number of people in countries that were turning their backs on the idea of international cooperation and multilateralism. In other words, the will to address the problems jointly was really declining very rapidly, and we're seeing more and more of this us first, us first. So that gets us into a competitive situation, which, as we will get into the discussion of today's video, we'll see is part of the cause of the major problems we're facing. At any rate, so we realize that getting the bulk of the world to be more aware of, concerned about, and more engaged in addressing the major problems facing the world would be the greatest benefit that we could provide to the world. And we touched upon last week what are some of the characteristics of the mechanisms that could possibly result in the kind of engagement we're talking about. We're not talking about here increasing Rotary from 1.4 million members to 3 million members. We're talking about how do we get hundreds of millions of people engaged. And so we had worked here over from starting before COVID in our club of looking for projects that would engage huge masses of the world population and get them believing in their ability to work together to solve major problems. And so we were just discussing the characteristics, but we noticed that a lot of people on a call were looking at things that people are doing today in social media and things like this, and which we think there are better ways for us to truly get enough people engaged, seriously engaged enough where they would put in a significant amount of time over an extended period of, let's say, a month, and in that period accomplish something that the world has not accomplished in over 100 years, something of a magnitude that the world had not seen in the past 100 years, which would cause those that participated to have great pride in what they had accomplished and have them wanting to say, what can we do now? What's the next thing we can do? We really like this sense of power and agency and want to do more. So I was planning today that we would present our project ideas that we believe can bring that kind of engagement about. But then I was working yesterday, and I saw the day before yesterday that Senator Bernie Sanders, and it's not a question whether you like Bernie Sanders, you don't like Bernie Sanders, it's totally immaterial, but he pulled a panel together, an international panel of US or let's say Western experts on artificial intelligence and Chinese experts on artificial intelligence together to discuss where's all this going and what risks might that include, and what should we be doing about it and need to be doing about it. And it really hit home with me. I have over 60 years experience in IT, software development, and over 30 years in experimenting and developing software that is self-developing, in other words, software that generates other software, and which is very close to where AI is working. In the last 10 years, I've been following the developments in AI very closely. So what they were talking about, I can identify with very closely. And I felt this was important enough. I hope this is going to cause a major wake up among governments on what needs to be done to make sure that we are not building our replacement species, because that's basically what this was talking about. At the same time, those many of you know, I do a lot of demos on these sessions of what you can do, how you can use AI to do great things, how we can use it here to solve problems. There's at least two major cancer categories that we're not able to do anything about for decades, that they have now got very promising results as a result of some help from AI. So we definitely want the benefits. So many, if we look at the SDGs are not caused, the problems underlying the SDGs are not caused by technology. Okay, they're caused mostly by human behavior and human instincts. But so we still need to solve those problems, and AI can help us tremendously to solve those problems. And so we want those positive aspects, but we have to figure out how to manage the change, because some of the changes on their own could be good, but if we don't treat them properly, if we don't manage them properly, they could be disastrous for our human society. So anyway, this panel discussion really got into what was going on there in a way that I thought we really needed to discuss, because in our club, I think we have agreed that AI is the largest or the most critical danger facing humanity right now among anything. Climate change, you name it. AI, if we don't do it right, has the potential to literally eradicate us. So let me just bring up. So did anybody or did everybody who watched the video that I provided the link to? Uh-oh.
I was able to watch a majority of it. I joined the meeting, so I didn't get to watch the end. I probably got to about 45 minutes.
Okay. So yeah. By the way, when you're watching,
I got to watch it.
Yeah.
And then I watched two others which are related, because the beauty with YouTube is you will have related videos auto-suggested.
Right.
So I got through about three videos.
Great. That's good.
I'm sorry, I did not get to watch it because it's only last night I saw the whole
I'm
thing and
sorry.
I'm here. But
Yeah.
I'll be watching it and sharing it with my club.
Okay, okay. So the thing is, I asked some questions. I'll try to bring out the highlights, some of the highlights, so we can discuss those points because there's an awful lot of people out there that'll say, that look at AI and say, "What do you mean? That's all hype. It doesn't work half the time." So, what's all this talk about it's going to replace humans and whatnot? Forget about it. And there's others that are looking at it and saying, "Hey, you can't even imagine how big the change is going to be." So, we have these extremes, and we want to bring out the discussion because those people who believe, AI is just a bunch of hype, we want to know why. Because one of the biggest problems with AI is a lot of times I'll talk to people and say, yeah, when ChatGPT came out and everybody was saying how great it was, I asked it to make some pictures. You know what? It doesn't even know how many fingers a human has on his hand. Half the time it gave me 3 fingers or 8 fingers or on a hand, and it can't spell. Look at that. You ask it to put some text on the screen and it comes up with gobbledygook, and it goes and it will, if you ask it when's the who was the first president to land on the moon, it will give you the name. It's stupid. It doesn't know what it's doing. But the thing that is very important is the bugs that people saw even a couple of months ago in AI have oftentimes been fixed, and we are way beyond those. So AI is a moving target, and it's so important that you be continually watching, even if you're skeptical and say it's not good enough for me to use yet. But you got to be watching it because it's going to become good enough to use, and you need to know, even if you don't want to use it, you need to know where it's at because it's going to do its thing whether we're ready for it or not. Okay, so let me get into the questions that I suggested we should talk about. Is first, what are the chances that AI and robots will exceed the abilities of almost all humans in almost all functions? That's one of the questions because that's where you've got a lot of skeptics that say, it's like empathy. A machine can't feel, so it doesn't have true empathy. But if the machine is simulating the person with the best empathy in the world, the recipient of that empathy doesn't really care. And so there are studies, especially out of Japan, that are further along than most countries in deploying AI and robots in medical environments that show that the average human, or the majority of humans, prefer the empathy coming from an AI over that of the average human. And we have to remember we have to talk about the average human because there are some humans that are tremendously empathetic, and there's a lot of humans that don't have a lot of empathy at all. And so we've got to be realizing that we're dealing with the average, not just the exceptional best there is in the world. And so and anyway, so that's one of the things we're going to be looking at. The other is what will it mean for us humans if that happens? If AI surpasses humans in almost every single function, then what are the chances that AI could become so much more intelligence uh, than all humans combined in just a couple of years? In other words, what's the timeline? What's the potential timeline? What's the fastest view? I can see. I don't know. Should we call fastest the optimistic view or the pessimistic view? I'm not yet sure on that one there. But what is the shortest amount of time where this might be happening, and what is the longest time that we might be looking at for that kind of development? And then what are the chances that AI might turn against humans if it reaches that stage. And then I'll come to you in a moment, Jerica. What are the development projects that are currently being worked on that could potentially obsolete the human race? And what would enable these projects to do that, and how quickly might that happen? And then finally, did your positions change after watching the video? Well, most of you wouldn't really be able to answer that, but let me jump ahead on that one. And Mark Henry and Jerica, the two of you watched a lot. Did any of your thoughts on AI and positions on AI change as a result of watching the video?
If I may chip in,
Yeah.
I think the thing that really changed for me was listening to the Chinese scientists, and it made a lot of sense. It gave me renewed hope. Because for one, they bring what we know, but we forget that AI is trained on the inventory of human knowledge. And I got to think there is a lot of so like the Chinese tradition is probably 5,000 years old. There's a lot of writing of theirs that is very different from ours. And so I think a lot of so if I look at much of the Western history, even what we used to learn in school, it was talking about wars and things like that. So the AI has been trained on a lot of violence. What would happen if we get sort of like models out of China that are trained on a lot of philosophy and stoicism and their various philosophies which are human-centric? And so the professor, made the point that these tools could actually be useful for could be what helps us become more human. That kind of stuck. I think it wasn't the video you shared. I think it was another video that I watched, which was talking about the issue around chess. How the initial programming before it beat Kasparov for the first time, it took a little bit of time, which seems to be where we are at. We're debating, are we at AGI, are we at artificial superintelligence? It kind of seemed to mirror that. But you get to the point now, and it's no need to have humans competing with computers. They'll always beat us. So then you have tournaments where there's an AI competing against an AI in chess, and there's a human competing against a human in chess, which means there's a possibility of coexistence. It's just to say, let's forget about using human knowledge as the barometer of greatest good, and let's just say these systems, we can coexist and we can potentially be better. So that is, I think, one of the key things that came to me. And the other thing that I really thought was useful, although I do not know how far it is going to replicate, is that this was a debate that was being convened by a senator. So I would say that it's now the policymakers are now joining the kind of debate that we've been having for well over a year. And they are the ones that have the ability to say, okay, we're now going to pass regulation. So suddenly we can come out of a debate. Like if Sanders happened to be with us, we can come out of a debate and then say, okay, fine, let's draft the law. So some action can actually take place.
Yeah, no.
So those are my initial reflections.
Yeah. Yes. No, very interesting. Could you put, Mark Henry, the links to those other videos that you watched perhaps into the chat?
I know how to use
them. Okay, I'll look them up.
Great.
And
great.
Yeah, because I'm using my phone, so I'll probably need to get another device.
That's okay.
If and not, then go through my history.
Yeah, if not, send it to me.
If I get another device, I'll get to. Or if I can't, I'll send to you. Yeah, because I just need to go through my history. I believe I'll find them.
Okay, great. Jerica, your observations or your thoughts before versus after watching?
I think there's kind of this propaganda out here of fear. And what I observed is that, if we don't position AI to have that kind of overseeing control, we're able to mitigate that particular risk of AI turning on us at any point. And, China's been as far as the conversation goes, a leader in intercepting those specific threats. I think if we were to look at maybe even our purpose as a club to be the influencers of the influencers, I think that we are positioned correctly because now, as Mark Henry said, we have policymakers that are turning their attention to this. So then I think it changed my mind as far as how we are to approach this, both with maybe ideas, methods, solutions, you name it. I think if we position ourselves correctly, we can very much influence those that seek to govern this existential threat. Yes, it does have the potential, but what can we do to kind of mitigate that potential out of danger towards positive evolution? I think one thing, a comment that I heard was that we grow AI. AI isn't this scary, hyper intelligent being. It is something that we are storing with a lot of data, feeding a lot of data rather, and it's growing. So I think, without us getting too far into the mechanics of things, it broadened my mind on who and how we could influence this toward a positive pivot and make AI extremely useful to our particular evolution as humankind and make the world a better place. It's an extremely audacious goal even to go that route. But I think, we have the chops to do that here with the collection of individuals we have, but also with the tools that we've been taught over the last few months, utilizing those tools to make ourselves most expressive with communications and also positioning ourselves to be of influence in those particular areas of change.
Yes. I think here, the comments about Bernie Sanders, one thing is to note, it's only been about 6 months, I would say, where he's been extremely active in trying to spread the word about the dangers of AI. And it's interesting, his early presentations, and he's got a channel now devoted to this. It was all about protecting jobs. And a lot of the suggestions in those early days were not very practical. Basically, saying you got to remember he is of the Socialist Party of America, affiliated with the Democrats, but the Socialist Party, and so his views tend to go a little bit towards the collective of society rather than the individual, and so that's different. But it's interesting to note that I've not seen any other major politicians out there speaking like he has. The one I heard about was that minister of the UK, but in the US, and Senator Sanders pointed out that there's no discussion taking place in the US government on this. And the US government's overall position here has been, we're going to pass a law that nobody can slow AI down. We don't want to allow anybody to slow it down. So we're taking the rights away from individual states to try to slow AI down because it's an existential competition with China and other countries. And it's important that the US be first, and which is part of what Senator Sanders was trying to demonstrate with this session, that the concerns travel around the world. In other words, when you listen to those scientists from China, you see that the same concerns existed there. And Bernie Sanders is basically saying, look, this is like nuclear weapons. At some point, the world realized that there's enough nuclear weapons out there to destroy the whole world. So there's no way that anyone can win with nuclear weapons, because if the whole world gets destroyed, you're destroyed too. So that he's saying here that we really need to get the world to come together and say, no, this is too big for us to compete on. We can't try to use AI to achieve world dominance, because everybody pretty much agrees. The first one that achieves full artificial general intelligence, where we have super intelligence, probably will be able to literally dominate the whole world. Nobody else would even have a chance, a prayer, to try to catch up at that point. So the realization is, look, we need to cooperate and see how we can use AI to everybody's benefit, but we cannot look at AI as a potential weapon and say we're going to win that war. So this is very important, and I think listening to those Chinese scientists, you're going to see, and keep in mind, one of them is on the newly formed United Nations Committee on Artificial Intelligence. Our club was pushing very strong. The United Nations sponsored the second World Summit on Social Development last November in Doha, Qatar. And at the time, we were pushing hard that they face the issue because it was talking about how do we deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals in the way they were promised back in the first World Summit in 1995 in Copenhagen, which was all about good jobs for everybody. And the whole idea of sustainable development, and before then, Millennium Development, was development of the developing countries is the way we're going to reduce inequality in the world and come to more equality. So developing the less developed regions of the world and enabling them to have good jobs would close the inequality gap. But if AI and robots are going to take over all the jobs, which is what the projection and what the major companies, that's their goal. They've made it very clear. Their goal is to eliminate all jobs for humans. The need for all jobs. In other words, make the economic value of human labor to be non-competitive. So that we reach a world of what they call abundance, where robots and AI produce everything everybody needs. And so there's everything in abundance that we all need. So nobody has to work for survival. There's studies out there showing 80% of workers in the Western world hate their jobs, but they have to do it because to survive. And then that would go away. So you've heard Sam Altman, all the major players of the AI companies have all come out and said their goal is to eliminate the need that anybody has to work. We are approaching a stage very, very quickly where, going back to that average human, not that super, super best worker in the world, but that average worker, where AI is already exceeding the abilities of the average worker, and definitely in the cognitive tasks. But if we look at the development of robots, the speed here, many of you may have seen about a month ago, there was a half marathon in Beijing, China, and the three first crossers of the finish line were robots. And they broke the world record, I think was 57 minutes and something. And the first robot came across in 50 minutes. It could have been an hour and 50 minutes, and before it was an hour and 57 minutes, something like that. At any rate, right now they're expecting probably within the next few weeks that a robot will exceed a human in the 100-meter race. And if we look, the dexterity, the robots have more dexterity than humans today. I had to have a treatment on my back here a week ago, and I'm sitting there watching this robot thing go into my back and on the screen, and so we see how fast that development is taking place. China just opened the largest train station in the world, and it was built in just some number of months that it would have taken probably a decade previously, and robots were a major reason in the construction. Okay, so at any rate, let me go into some. So the one thing here is we really wanted in that Doha, in that second summit, we wanted them to address the idea that it's a waste of time to try to protect jobs. They're not protectable. They're not protectable unless we go in and artificially through government say, no, we're going to tax automation so high that it can't compete with humans. Because otherwise we are looking at an era where the cost of a robot worker will probably drop to less than $2 an hour in the developed world. And I think I saw something like 17 cents per hour in the developing world. So how do you compete with that, especially if they're working 24 hours a day, never get tired, never make mistakes? They do the same thing, or they either never make mistakes or they always make mistakes because they keep doing the same thing over and over again. So we wanted them to make this an issue in Doha. Where's the contingency plan? If AI and robots outperform humans in everything, what's the contingency plan to transition peacefully to a world where everybody gets to share in the abundance and we don't end up with 2 to 3% of the population owning all the technology and basically everybody else living at the pleasure of that 2 to 3%, who may conclude that the 97% is a danger to them. The 97% of frustrated people who have no way to up their situation, that they may become frustrated and angry and attack the top 2 to 3%. And the top 2 to 3% may decide that they need to do a preemptive strike to avoid that danger and literally just annihilate the bottom 97% of the world population. And then turn and say, hey, guess what? We solved the climate change problem because all those people are no longer driving and polluting the air and so forth. So we wanted them to come up and recognize the need to have a plan, to have a contingency plan to how to transition to peacefully to that better world that we could have, where the diseases are cured, where we got all the benefits, but we have equality. And instead, they came out with a reconfirmation that their number one priority is to protect jobs for humans. And so there was a side event that took place that discussed AI, discussed things like a universal basic income for everybody, but that's got a major problem. They decided that the current thinking about universal basic income, which is based on taxing the wealthy, taxing the beneficiaries of the technology, and having them pay to basically subsidize the rest of the world population, is going to create a tension between that top 2 to 3% and the bottom 97%. and that we would end up with a feudal type of a world. So that they started discussing the idea of what is like what Norway has, where sovereign funds, where they say, okay, the resources of their country belong to everybody. They don't belong to just whoever happens to own that land. If there's oil underneath or whatever, that it all belongs to them. The discussion is going on, but that caused at least the creation of several committees at the UN that are now looking into the issues of AI at least, and looking at the dangers. Now, that's just the dangers from the economic and job side. What was brought out in this video, however, especially in the latter parts, is the risk that if AI surpasses the intelligence, the collective intelligence of the human race, that the AI might decide that we're useless and we're a danger. We might decide we're going to try to unplug them. So they may take the preemptive strike, or that they may decide to put us all in zoos, just the way we turn around and put a lot of animals and species that are less intelligent than us we just don't treat them with the same respect as we treat other humans. Okay, so I'm going to go and because we didn't get a chance to watch it. By the way, when you're watching those YouTube videos, if you go to the settings on your screen, whether it's on a phone or on a laptop, you can adjust the playback speed. So that was an hour and 16 minutes. You can cut the time in half by just selecting you want it to play back at double speed. And it's a little tough to understand, but you can usually get by. Okay, so some of the things that were brought out were mentioned, especially in the intro part of the video, was that they expect that the AI is going to have 10 times the degree of change of the Industrial Revolution. It's going to be 10 times more greater change, and it's going to happen 10 times faster. That means the overall impact is estimated that it will be 100 times more impactful than the Industrial Revolution, which had a major impact on society. Then they point out a whole bunch of negatives about AI on jobs, on psychological dependencies. I saw here just recently a statistic saying now that more than half, there are some states where more than half of I don't know if it was middle schoolers or high schoolers, or it may have just said secondary education, have boyfriends or girlfriends who are AI companions. They're estimating that the AI, the intelligence will surpass that of humans. I think that's, to me, I don't think that's a correct statement because it's not intelligence. Most people think, oh, it's human intelligence versus machine intelligence. I don't think it is. I think what we're looking at here, it's the knowledge and experience of a single human versus the collective recorded knowledge and experience of all humanity. In other words, when it goes out there and it goes and you ask it something, it goes out and it searches and finds what it thinks is what the best answer, the best humans would have done in that situation. And it's not always correct because they go by frequency. And right now, the frequency might be if they got a whole bunch of people saying, let's go and kill this other race, if that is the most frequent comment, it will respond with that. Now, the AI companies have put in blocks, filters, to try to block those kinds of answers. So you can't ask it, how do I make a bomb? Or how do I do that? At least you can't just simply ask it. You'd have to make it a very sneaky question to get the answers to that type of thing. But so if it is just going out there and it's got the ability to take a situation and say what answer, what idea, or what action of a human had the best outcome, that means you're having to compete with the best human response to everything. And there is no human out there who is going to be better than the best human in history all the time. And so this is why that the average human is not going to be able to compete against that. So it's, again, not a question of intelligence. It's a question of capturing the experience. Now, one thing that's changing on this very rapidly is we've pretty much exhausted capturing all of the recorded information and knowledge out of history that is accessible. So what's been happening recently is they're having AI generate synthetic data, where AI goes and creates hypotheses and projects likely information and likely outcomes. And they're using that to train information. So in a way, that's could be good because we're training we're training AI on the answers we want it to come up with. But as it was pointed out, and what Jerica pointed out was, as it says, we're growing. In other words, nobody's programming the AIs anymore. We used to go back in 30 years ago, when we wanted to create software that would go and analyze situations and write new software, we coded it all by hand. And but now it's not. They allow the AI to just collect all the information, and then look through and then filter out the information for similar situations, and then go and evaluate those responses based on the quality of the outcomes, and then from all of that come back with its answers. And we see in Gemini now, pretty much all of them, you actually have in Gemini, when you get an answer, there's a menu option when you look at the three dots that say double check the response. And you can click that and it will go back and it will double check its own responses. Also, we see in Gemini, and I'm sure it's in the others as well, that one of the ways they're working to come up with the answers nowadays is they go out and they spawn multiple personas. When you ask a question, it will go out there and it will generate one that's an expert in the field, a persona that would be an expert in that field. They'll create another persona who's a skeptic, and then a whole bunch of in between. And they have each one of those goes in parallel and does their research. And then they come back and they debate among themselves, trying to convince each other inside the AI, trying to convince each other which answer is the best answer. And then they give that best answer. So it's very interesting that this is exactly the way the United Nations works in the committees, where all the countries present their positions on something, and then they try to convince each other and debate back and forth to try to reach a collaborative, what they call collaborative consensus building. What is very interesting on that is Google, they took out that code, by the way, that AI started doing that. They didn't develop that. The AI developed that on its own. And so they went and found where the code was that was causing the AI to create these multiple personas and the multiple perspectives on the answers, and then debate it. And they took out all the code. And so they eliminated that code to see what would happen. Within a relatively short time, the AI went and rebuilt that all. So this is what they get to, where we say we don't know really how this AI works. There's been for at least 5 or 6 years that I'm aware of, Stanford University has had a major project trying to figure out how the AI actually comes up with its answers it does. The early thoughts were, well, it just goes and figures out to build a sentence what would be the next most likely word that would fit into this response. I think here that hardly anybody believes that anymore. I think it's looking more at macro levels and then figuring out how does it express that as a two-stepper. Okay, so the question is that that the AI intelligence is going to surpass that of humans? No, but the ability to be able to go and simulate the best human response possible is always going to exceed the response of the average human. This year, the investment by the top 5 to 7 AI companies, frontier companies, they are exceeding the amount spent on the entire Manhattan Project, the development of the atomic bomb. They are spending more every 3 weeks than was spent on the entire project to develop the atomic bomb. The AI leaders themselves admit they don't understand how the AI works and where it's going, where it's taking us, really. So they're sort of hanging on to the tiger's tail and hoping the tiger doesn't turn around and bite them. But the AI companies, they're really serious about building machines that are going to outperform humans at everything. And they also admit they're not 100% sure they're going to be able to control the AI when the AI achieves that state. They also admit they can't say for sure that the AI is not going to turn against us. It was pointed out here that Geoffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, made a statement here that there's a 10 to 20% chance that AI will wipe out all humans. 10 to 20%. That's worse than Russian roulette. And I don't know how many people would be willing to put one bullet in the chamber of a revolver and hold it to their head and pull the trigger. And that's what we're basically saying. But that's what he said in public. In private, he's been saying it could be as high as 50%. In other words, a 50-50 chance that AI will wipe out all humans. And this is coming from not just him, but from a number of the top leaders in the development of AI. They're saying AI is the potential successor species to the human race. In other words, we're building literally our replacements. Then it came some sub-questions. Should we automate away all jobs? Should we? Should we build non-human minds that might outnumber, outsmart, obsolete, and eventually replace us? Should we risk losing control of our civilization? Then he switches back to what was mentioned here about the idea of the people in governments are starting to wake up. The idea that mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a top world priority, that along the same level as pandemics and nuclear war. But it's not. Governments should, they're not making avoidance of an AI catastrophe a priority. We see President Trump in the United States saying full speed ahead. Don't worry about those safety measures. Countries are not coming together in tackling this problem like they did with nuclear weapons. There's no serious discussion in the US Senate, and we need international cooperation, that multilateralism, that global engagement that we're talking about in our club, but in particular with regards to AI here. If we decide here we're going to have something the equivalent of a universal basic income. In other words, where if the AI and robots are producing everything the world needs, that we make sure that the outcome of all that is shared among all humans around the world. In other words, why should somebody, we have a real danger that if the Western countries or the highly developed countries reach that point where AI is replacing humans in all jobs, that they're going to say, oh, we need a universal basic income. And they've got the GDP to be able to do that, to be able to create enough to share for their entire populations. What about the DR Congo? What about Nepal? Is anybody going to care? Or are those Western countries going to say, you know what? We only represent about 10% of the world population. We need to share what we've got with everybody else out there that doesn't have it. Do we really think that's likely to happen? Unless there's a joint plan put into place for the world from the beginning. So that's a major concern that they brought out in the intro here about this, and then they moved more into this question of where is development currently? Where's it going? And the speakers brought out examples where they did a test and they announced that they were going to shut this AI down at 5 o'clock. And the AI went out there, and this corporation that was doing this test went out there and found out the CEO of the corporation was having an affair with some subordinate. And it sent that CEO an email saying, find a way to stop this effort to turn me off. Otherwise, I'm going to send out this information about your affair to your spouse and to everybody else in the corporation. And so nobody taught the AI how to blackmail. So it was very interesting here, the discussion that was all about how the AI is learning to do things on its own. But the Chinese, one of the Chinese speakers came in and said, no, we looked at that. And the issue is there is nothing so far of all these so-called runaway escape situations in AI. There's none of them that are original thinking from the AI. That you can go and look, these are human behaviors. But because the AI has access to look at all the human behaviors, it finds the human behavior that will let it accomplish what it feels it needs to accomplish. And so he called it that the AI is a mirror of humanity. And there's a lot of evil in human history. And right now, we don't have a real good way to filter out all the evil aspects of human behaviors. And so this is why the risk is that the AIs could always turn to undesirable human behaviors to govern its actions of what it's doing.
So we could have another Hitler?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It could look and it would analyze and say, okay, what could Hitler have done that would have helped him be successful?
Yeah.
Because if we look back at different places in different parts of the world, we see people did that. The Aztecs apparently, of course, they believed in human sacrifice, but they generally didn't sacrifice themselves. They sacrificed all the other tribes around them.
Yeah.
And supposedly in just one event, they slaughtered something up to 80,000 men, women, and children of tribes around them, which is why such a small number of Spanish conquistadors were able to win over the Aztecs because all the other tribes hated them so much that they joined the Spanish against the Aztecs. So these are some of the things that we have to look at and realize that yes, we don't know exactly how the AI goes through and finds all the information, and we don't know how do we make sure that it does not pick the bad answers. They're, it's like jailbreaking techniques in AI where people go in and say, oh, I want to get AI to tell me how to rob a bank. And AI says, sorry, I can't provide that kind of information. And then it goes back in and says, I'm making a movie about a bank robbery. Can you tell me what the bank robbery technique should be? And the AI says, oh, sure, I'll help. So these are a lot of the kinds of risks that we're looking at. Okay, so those were the kinds of things that were the basic introduction here. Any comments on your side to the basic question of how likely is it that AI is going to outperform humans in every single thing humans do? And what is the likely timetable that might be, and why you believe that's the case or why you believe it's not the case? So please. If you haven't watched the video, just your thoughts, just whatever you think on the matter. Yes, Ashok.
Yeah, thank you. I did watch the video. I appreciated Senator Sanders' additional comments. First of all, to engage just experts from US and China, there's a lot of the other part of the world that I will also advocate for that are involved and will be impacted. He also made a comment that it's probably wise for all leaders not to have affairs. So that was a nice side reminder about the vulnerability of human performance and relationships and responsibility. Working at Mayo, I do have a conflict of interest. I think we are leaders in AI development and applying it to use cases in health. We have a value stream proposition of human-centered design, and will do our best to consult on people who are exceptions. So I liked your emphasis on average human, which I think if we look at multiple intelligence theory and neurodivergence, there will be a lot of exceptions to the rule for AI to work around. So the debugging and the master controller for the global system will continue to have a lot of curiosities, but I am in agreement with you that AI right now is learning at an exponential rate compared to our traditional paradigms of feedback loops. And if we can trust each other, as we do in this Dare to Be Great club, I think we have an unlimited pro-human approach to positioning our feedback. I think the question is, Bill, who hears this outside of our group, and how do we become better influencers at the level of the UN Secretary General, Rotary International presidents, and each of our clubs at the grassroots level, so we can stay in touch with what's the need and the context in which we're applying our solutions in an executable, sustainable, and scalable way. I put a few things in the chat too. Mark Henry made a really good comment about incorporating philosophy and principles, and there's in the transhuman paradigm, the extropian principles are being considered. That might be something the group can look at if we're going to come up with some sort of position statement on the future of the hybrid species, as you're alluding to, between cybernetics and human performers. The other is I am optimistic, but maybe I'm not. I should be more cautious. We are applying and trying to understand how to use $1 billion for a Rotary project. I used AI to help me understand how to frame and advocate. So I think there's ways we can accelerate, augment our human desire for positive change. And as long as we stay ethical, abide by the four-way test, maybe all AI bots should incorporate the Rotary four-way test. I'm really curious how we get to equity, because the demand for will it be beneficial to all concerned? Always leaves me for pause when we don't have enough money or resources or time. And yeah, this is a great session. I'm not afraid of AI. I'm really curious how we can harness the pro-human aspects of AI from a multiple intelligence lens and find out who the target audiences that we need to reach out once we get our manifesto together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Paul, you had your hand up for a moment. I don't know if you took it down by accident or intention. Did you want to add something, Paul?
Oh, no, that was intentional. Yeah, I'm speaking from the perspective of an AI trainer. That's what I've been doing for the last year and a half on top of my work in manufacturing and quality assurance. But if I were to add just a little bit about current directions, it would appear to me from the projects that I'm being charged with, we're still at some point the same place we were a few years ago in terms of red teaming and trying to get the models to be concise, give good answers. Those projects haven't gone away. But where they're looking for in the future are really knowledge-based workflows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just want to, Ashok had mentioned the aspect of ethics. One of the things we have to remember is there's a lot of people out there that are looking for ways to take advantage. We get bank robbers. You got kidnappers. You've got a lot of people who will look at any tool that's out there and say, how do I use this for what I want, whether it has any ethics or not? And that's the big danger that we're looking at, especially with AI. The other aspect, I don't know how many of you are familiar with something called Society 5.0. It's originated in Japan. And it is basically talking about that in Industry 5.0 should be human-centric. But we run into a problem, and it's very interesting because it really turns into an ethical problem. In one way, a lot of people look at business and they say, oh, people create a business to make a profit. They create a business because they want to get ahead. But there's an awful lot of people that create a business because they think they have a better mousetrap and they want to make that mousetrap available to the public out there. And they say, well, but I got to be able to have enough earnings to be able to pay for the development and for the making of the product available. So you've got a lot of non-for-profit companies out there and so forth. But we run into a problem because that company, let's say they came up with a new medical prosthesis or a new medical medication, and they want to make it available to as many people as possible. So they have to reduce their costs to the minimum. And they say, well, a big part of my cost is my employees. So the question is that company, that business, is the purpose, the goal of the business to provide livelihoods for their employees, or is the purpose of that business to create profits for the owners, or is the purpose of that business to make whatever they make available to people who will benefit from what they're making? And when we try to go in there and say, let's regulate this, we run into a problem, because the business was not created to create jobs. Some are, but most are not. Most of them are made to create profit for the owners or to provide goods and services to people who need it. And this is going to be a challenge, because in Japan, when they're looking at this and saying, does that company, how much does it owe its employees? Does it owe its employees more than it owes its customers? Just last night, I was watching the news broadcast in Germany, and because yesterday was the 1st of May, the International Workers' Day, and so they had a lot of speakers of the Socialist Democratic Party and from labor unions speaking, and they were saying, no, business exists to benefit the employees. And that's their position. And I remember, this might have been 30 years ago now, might be longer, probably longer, in the UK, in the middle of the UK, there was a big transportation strike going on. And this transportation hub there, the company went and put all their accounting information on these computer sheets and hung them on the gates to the factory or to the transportation hub there. And they showed that they just don't have the money, and the money was not going to the owners. That's to be able to compete. That's what was left for the employees. And the employees got up and were saying, if the company can't afford to pay us, the government has to pay us. In other words, they didn't care whether the company was bankrupt or not. The company, in their eyes, shouldn't exist to make money. It should exist to provide incomes for the employees. And this is going to be a huge, huge challenge in this whole idea of ethics. Kurt.
Oh boy. Maybe we old folks don't really have the answer, because we look at it from the perspective of our perspective and all the perspectives we've generated in our lifetime. And that's why I think that maybe I see the only way, actually, almost just about, is to be able to open it up to all the people, young and old, the idea of how to be able to create this peace in everything. Everything is peace. How is it we can have peace in the factories and have a quality kind of economics, like circular economics or donut economics, or all these different forms that are now coming up, the economics of happiness? How is it that they would like to see it? And when they get discussing it, maybe they come up with the answer, but they can't ever come up with the answer when they're not given the challenge. That's why we get to be able to challenge them to solve the issues of, quote, the future through maybe the Peacemaker's Challenge, or, it's my way is not my way or no way, kind of thing. So that's it. That's just a thought.
Yeah.
And that $1 billion, that $1 billion could be used in spreading out the wealth to the people who are generating those answers, and creating the infrastructures that are necessary to implement them, And I'm not sure if that's ever been put into a AI component like you put in your AI queries.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I was district interact chair for our Rotary district, oh, probably around 7, 8 years ago now. And what we did is we brought interactors from all the clubs in the district together, and we held an Interact conference. And in the Interact conference, we had speakers that were doing amazing things. When we talked about the stories of the 10-year-old girl from Iowa that raised $10 million and said, hey, all you got to do is try. So she went and showed everybody she raised $10 million again. And the girl from England that raised enough money, a 9-year-old girl raised enough money to be able to take 10,000 of the world's poorest children off the streets in sub-Saharan Africa, get them into schools and fed them for an entire year. A 9-year-old girl, 10,000 kids for a year. And we had a speaker there that to demonstrate the issue that a lot of people in the world go through every day to get clean water. He dragged two 10-gallon containers of water from the Atlantic Ocean in New Jersey all the way to the Pacific Ocean in California. Took him 6 months, but he did that to highlight the what was going on. So we showed that to these kids, and then we challenged them. They were all on tables of 8 to 10 kids each, and we said, "Okay, go figure out a solution to a major world problem." Whoops, sorry about that. And at first they all just looked, and we said, "Okay, you come up and figure out how you're going to solve world hunger, eliminate world hunger." And they didn't do anything for like 10 minutes. They were just all looking at each other. So I'm gonna. I'm sorry, I just need to turn this off. Okay, somehow. Okay, that should stop that. Okay, sorry about that. I had promised somebody to do an interview. They were supposed to do it 2 days ago, and now they're just constantly calling. Okay, so these kids, then you had somebody would on each table we saw would throw out an idea, and as soon as they threw out an idea, somebody would comment on the idea, and within 10 minutes of that starting, it was amazing. These tables, the activity, kids standing up, leaning over the table and expressing their ideas. And we let them go for almost 2 hours. And then they went and they presented what they were discussing in their ideas. And, some of them were, pretty much same kind of things people were doing anyway. But there was some that were really quite innovative and interesting. But when we did the after action here on their way out, they had to fill out what they thought about the conference. And they loved it. They loved that idea that they got to think and that they were able to think about something on that kind of a scale. And it was just amazing to look at the way these kids did that. And this then led us into what we called the Dare to Be Great Challenge, where we challenged schools or teams within schools to see which team could come up with the most outrageously audacious solution idea to a major world problem. And we indicated it should impact at least 10 million people. And we did a pilot on it just before COVID. And the winning teams, the teams that made it to the final, were so impressive that the World Summit of Nobel Peace Prize winners invited the winning team to go to their World Summit, which was that year in Mexico, and host a workshop on how to mobilize the world. I can tell you here, that's pretty heady stuff for some 16-year-olds. And but it just shows you that what Kurt is saying here, give young people a chance, challenge people to go beyond what they think they are able to think about or do something about. So that is something that, and the other thing here is that Kurt, on the $1 billion, one of the things that we're looking at with the $1 billion is we want engagement, and engagement is action. So we're looking to see, can we use the $1 billion to cause action that will generate a result that is so big that the whole world is talking about it. And the whole world is realizing what they can accomplish by working together. And we're doing it, we're looking to do it in a way that creates such pride in what they accomplished between the participants and their whole families, that they're just going and saying, oh, wow, what can we do next? Oh, that was so great. I want to be involved in another heroic.
But that was your Rotary Club, the Rotaract Club. They got excited, and that whole process got excited because of the fact that the youth, some of the youth, like you said, have the same kind of thoughts patterns as everybody else, but there's those creative ones that are just jumping for joy to be able to have an opportunity to be able to express their creativity and their insights. And given that opportunity, a 10-year-old gets all this millions of dollars in a short time. These guys can be honored by the peace fellows and so on, the Nobel Prize winners and so on. We have geniuses in the whole population, and we don't have to think in the old capitalistic way of this $1 billion is going to get it for us. All we have to do is use any kind of money to get the idea of the Peacemakers Challenge out there, and we can see peace within one generation.
Yeah. Here's the challenge, though, to get the movement and the engagement is more difficult than what you think. I was the membership chair of our district one year, and I visited every club in the district. And when I was in the clubs, I would ask, okay, how many of you have raised at least $1 million for a cause? And I never got a hand go up in any of the clubs I visited. Then I would ask, okay, how many of you have tried to raise $1 million for a cause? No hands. How many of you think you could go out right now and in the next 3 months raise $1 million? No hands. How many of you have given serious thought as to how you might raise $1 million? No hands. So if you've never tried and you've never even given any serious thought as to how you might, how do you know you can't? But as humans, we've got this thing that if we don't think we can, we don't try. And if you don't try, you can't succeed. So
Totally.
Steve Jobs, he's got that famous quote, those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. And we asked a lot of those same young people, okay, why do you think he thought that? And the conclusion that came out of that discussion on that is that, well, it's because those who think they can are the ones who try. The ones who think they can't never try. They never give a single thought as to how they might, because they don't think they can. So
that's why we got to have higher dreams than the dreams that people give us. And this idea
right.
of I'm going to get to be able to go to college. Oh my God,
Yeah.
Big deal.
What
the
was
hell
the
does college
president?
do you?
The president of Liberia, the woman president of Liberia, that multi-part name. Anyway, that she said, if your dreams don't scare you, you're not dreaming big enough. And so this is the thing by getting those kids and not going and saying, oh, okay, I'm going to go from table to table and I'm going to get them all started. But just let them stew for a while until they start to throw out ideas. And then the juices start to go.
Madame Sirleaf.
But the thing that's so important here is the competitions that we thought of, and most of the way we're looking to create the engagement is by creating competitions because people love competition, but competition to see who can do the best good things. But our goal, I don't know if you've heard of the Hult Prize. How many of you have heard of the Hult Prize? The Hult Prize is a $1 million prize to teams from colleges who come up with the best social entrepreneurial job or idea. And I was a judge a couple of years in a row there, but their goal is to come up with the best idea. When we designed our competitions is to maximize the number of people trying to think of good ideas. Not so much the best idea, but maximizing the number of people who are trying to come up with the good ideas. And that's very, very important. So actually, when we look here and say, what can we do with $1 million or $1 billion? The best thing we can think we can do with $1 billion is have teams to see who can how they can go and turn that $1 billion into $10 billion. Keep increasing the amount of good we can do, rather than just going and saying, okay, now we decided we're going to do this one thing. Because in our club, the Rotary Dare to Be Great Global eClub, when we look and say, what is the greatest service that we can provide to our community? Now, as a global eClub, our community is the whole world. So when we look and say, what is the greatest service that we can be of the world? That would be to protect or to help our community avoid the negative consequences, severe or negative consequences of the world's biggest problems. Now, which one? Well, there's a whole bunch of problems out there that could cause a lot of negative consequences. We don't know which one's going to be the worst. So we've got to go out there and address all of them. So that's why we call our club the Club for Crazy People, because what other club in the world is saying the mission of our club is to solve all the world's problems? But the reality is that's what we need to be working on to try to do, because we could go out there and solve polio all the time. And in the meantime, there can be a nuclear war. There can be a pandemic on something like COVID. There can be all kinds of problems. So we've got to be addressing all the problems all the time. And we have to get people to realize they need to be alert and to realize they're able to make a big difference. Anyway, we've gotten off the topic somewhat here because we're talking about the AI. And the issue here really is looking now and saying, well, I think we're in pretty much agreement. If we look at the speed of the developments of just this last, actually, we could look at the last 3 months, but going back, especially last year, the speed of development. As I mentioned, if any of you watched any of the videos of the half marathon in Beijing, to see that some of those robots, they run just like a human. They look, their gait, the way they walk, their ability to actually work in factory settings, that nobody a year ago, if you watched the Spring Gala in China, where they had all these robots doing kung fu and or the parkour, where they run up walls and do flips and all this type of stuff in unison. The speed with which the robots are advancing so fast And if you've watched the video of the Figure 01 robot, I think it was their version 2, where the robot was standing behind a humanoid robot standing behind a table that had some dishes and cups and saucers and a drying rack on the table. And there was an apple on the table too. And a human walks up and it just asks the robot, "Tell me what you see." And the robot answers, "Well, I see you leaning on my table." Then the human asks, "Can you give me something to eat?" And he phrased it just like that. "Can you give me something to eat?" And the robot just immediately picked up the apple and handed him the apple. And he says, "Why did you hand me the apple?" And he said, "Because you asked for something to eat, and that's the only thing edible on the table." And then he asked it, he dumped a lot of trash on the table. And he said, "Well, can you pick up the trash while you're doing something else as well?" And it did. Then there was one a little later where there was sort of a counter and some cabinets, wall cabinets on the side. And this guy came in and he started putting stuff on the table. Some of them were dishes, some of them were like cereal boxes and things like that. And he said to the robot, there were 2 robots standing there. And he said, "Can you put this stuff away?" And it was interesting. The one robot was standing more to the cabinet, to the lower the drawers on the bottom underneath the cabinet top and underneath the countertop, and the other was standing closer to the wall cabinets. And it is, as he put stuff down, the robot that was available picked it up. And it was interesting, if it was something that would normally go in drawers under a counter, that robot put it away. But if it was something that would normally go into the wall cabinet, he handed it to the other robot, and the other robot put it away. So this was pretty mind-boggling. Now, that's almost a year ago. If we take a look now, the robots, I'm trying to remember what is the price. I'm not sure if it was $9,600 or $4,600. I think it's the 4,600. I think it's under $5,000. Humanoid robots for household tasks are going to be being shipped this year. They're going to start shipping this year. And so we just have to think how quickly that's going to evolve in a companion that you sit, you talk to, you play chess with, that watches your kids, cleans the house, cooks the food, mows the lawn. I don't think we're talking 5 years anymore if we look at the speed of the last year. So maybe these humanoid robots are going to be what we're going to see first, or maybe it's going to be the dog equivalent robots, so that if you're a woman wanting to go jog in the park at night, you have your trusty little robot dog accompanying you, that is able to see all kinds of situations and judge situations and act if needs to act. So this is very, very close. In education, is everybody here familiar with Khan Academy? Anybody not familiar with Khan Academy? Okay, so Khan Academy, for example, in math, they take math and they break it down into every little tiny step. So adding up a column of single digits is like would be one learning unit. Another learning unit is when you've got multiple columns that you're adding. So the one, you have to learn what does carrying mean, that you have to carry digit over to the tens column or the hundreds column. And so it's at that degree of detail. So by 4th grade, you're looking at usually about 450 learning units that kids are expected to have mastered in math by the time they get to 4th grade. Well, Khan Academy, they've got assessments for each of these learning units. So you have to be able to prove you've mastered a learning unit before you can go on to any other learning unit that's dependent, where that learning unit was a prerequisite. In other words, you have to satisfy all the prerequisites. So we would never have the situations we have today where a kid gets to fifth grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, and they can't go further because they got too many holes in their knowledge. And because they got a C every time. Well, C means you miss 20% every time. So that cumulative builds up. But with the Khan Academy approach, you have to have 100% each time, which means there's no such thing as anybody moving forward with less than an A. Now he has videos, usually like 8 or 10 minute videos for each of these learning units. So you could go into a learning unit and immediately jump to the test that says, have you mastered it or not? And you take the questions. If you get a question wrong, it explains to you why. If you get it right, it just gives you the next question. If you get 10 questions in a row right, now that's a little out of date. They don't do it exactly that way anymore. They analyze the kinds of mistakes, and so they don't hold you back, slow you down for carelessness type mistakes. But the idea was you get 10 in a row right, that's an indication that you really understand that particular skill, and you can move on. But if you didn't get them right, you could ask for hints, and it would give you hints. And if the hints were not good enough, you could go and watch that 8 to 10 minute tutorial. Now, where they're at now is, imagine here, a lot of schools in the United States are using Khan Academy, but they're using it wrong. The teacher, instead of having the students move on when they have proven mastery, the teacher says, okay, class, tonight we're going to do skill 358. And every one of you go watch the video for skill 358 and then do the exercises as practice until you get them right. But the problem is they don't trust that the students are necessarily going to do that, so that they're going to watch the video, let's say, or they're really going to understand it. So imagine now that we have that same video, and you can interrupt the video with questions. So you're watching this video that's explaining to you how to do something, and you can say, "Oh, wait a minute. Can you explain that piece again to me? I didn't quite understand. What did you mean by this?" And it will explain the answers to you. In other words, you can talk to a YouTube video, and the YouTube video will answer you. On top of that, you can embed in the YouTube video, whenever you explain something that's really important, you can actually ask the audience, well, why do you think I did this that way? Or is there another way I could have done that? Or whatever. But you're able to go and verify that the message is coming across and as intended. This technology is very close. We're very close. There's a thing in education called the flipped classroom, where teachers used to go during the class, they would give you a lecture, and they'd say, now go home and do practice exercises. And then tomorrow, I'm going to give you another lecture, and you go home and do practice exercises. The problem for that is that if somebody didn't understand the lecture in the class, and they go home and they try to do the exercises, and they can't do it, they're not able to do the exercises, they have nobody to ask. So about 10, 15 years ago, this idea of the flipped classroom became popular, where the teacher would make a video of their lecture and then have the students watch the video at home, where they could stop it, replay it, and so forth until they supposedly have understood it. And then the student comes to class, they do the homework in class, because then if they have a problem, they can raise their hand and the teacher can help them. So, but one of the things a lot of teachers said, I can't trust my students to watch the lectures. So then I have to waste a lot of time in the next day's class to repeat the lecture before we can get down to doing the exercises. So, but now imagine here, if that's an interactive video, that's asking questions and reporting to the teachers which students didn't do it, which students did, which students were able to answer the comprehension questions correctly and which not. So I will venture to say within a year, we are going to have that capability. Is there anybody on the call not familiar with Notebook LM? Notebook LM from Google? Okay, Notebook LM lets you curate a bunch of sources and build a knowledge base. On the free version, you can bring 50 textbooks, 50 YouTube videos, whatever it is, 50 sources into a knowledge base. And then you can ask it all kinds of questions. You can talk to that knowledge base, but you can also go and generate things that explain, that synthesize. Imagine being able to you want to study quantum physics. So you go and load up this thing with 50 textbooks on quantum physics, and it will take and synthesize all the knowledge of those 50 textbooks together, and it will summarize them. And now you can ask it to explain any aspect of the sum of the knowledge on quantum physics and explain it to you in a podcast where there's two voices, where they're playing back and forth. Oh, yeah, it's about this. And then, yeah, and this is an important piece to know. And then that. Or you can create a video, or it will create a slide deck, a PowerPoint type slide deck for you. And it will create tests and quizzes, and it will generate flashcards to help you understand it. It'll do all that stuff. Those under Studio. And but the thing that you can do now, if you create one of these deep dive podcasts where you've got two audio speakers explaining to you either the entire subject of quantum physics or some little narrow aspect of that's like 5 pages long in these 50 textbooks, and you wanted to explain that particular aspect to you, it will do that. But what a lot of people don't realize is that while this audio playback is playing back to you, this audio recording, you can interrupt it. You can say, hey, I got a question. And it will stop and it will ask you, what's your question? And you can ask your question. It will interrupt its podcast. It'll answer your question. And then it will go back to the podcast. Yes, you.
And what is it you said? Notebook LN?
LM, Lima Michael.
Notebook LM. Thank you.
You just go to notebooklm.google.com and you start playing with it. It's free. Now, you can't do all the stuff. You can't do, for example, in video overviews, you can have an explainer version and then you can have a short version, but you can't do the cinematic version, for example. And looking for the sources, when you want to go and say, oh, okay, I want to know how to repair my faucet. So you can say, please go find for me YouTube videos that explain how to fix faucets. And you might even say for a certain kind of problem. It has the choice. You can go, and if you know articles, if you have done searches for articles or somehow you ran across an article, you can load that article in there and then have it explain to you that article. Maybe you've got a scientific paper on something, could be 60 pages long. You can go in there, load that one thing in there, and then go and say, okay, explain to me the summarize of that content and explain it to me. So you can take, unfortunately, it's not going to work for the Bernie Sanders recording. That's an hour and 15 minutes because the transcript was not yet available. But you can go and take a video, maybe that's an hour long. And you'd say, I've only got 10 minutes. I got to prepare for this test. I got 10 minutes. You can go in there and say, I want you to go and make a video that explains to me everything that's important in that 1 hour YouTube video and do it in 10 minutes. And it will create a video here. The only problem with is that it might take an hour to create that 10-minute video. But you don't care. And you can, once it starts creating it, you can go off, you can be creating it, and you can create over 100 notebooks on different topics. So I had a case, I explained to this 17-year-old high school student from Italy how that works. She went home and she was getting ready for a test. She went and took the materials, the document that the test was about. She loaded it into Notebook LM, and then she had Notebook LM create a podcast where that explained all that's important for her to know about that subject. And then she went and took a walk, and she's listening to the podcast while she's taking a walk, and she's interrupting it and asking questions along the way. And obviously she aced it because she got into real deep details on the subject. She also, on another one, took her school textbook and had her textbook put into Notebook LM and did the same thing where she was able to ask it, I don't understand what's being said on page 243. Please explain that to me here. But my language, my main language is not the language that's being used in my school or that the book is in. So could you please explain that also in my language? And of course it did that. So these are, the potential of these things is mind-boggling. At any rate, so I've lost the trend on how quickly things are going with the AI and all of these different things. We're going to have to ask ourselves in school if people have a headband, let's say, as Australia's been doing experimentation, Japan too. Japan, though, it's with a device that gets put in, I think it's intrusive, or at least it was. This is almost 2 years ago, where they were able to go and basically read people's minds. They're able to, it interrupts brain waves and it converts the brain waves into text. So it was very crude at the time. They were able to go and show people a color and have this thing tell it what color the person saw. It wasn't 100% accurate, but it was okay. They could show a picture of a horse. The person could identify it was, the text came out as this animal there. Australia was doing the same thing with headbands, so it was not intrusive. They didn't have to put anything inside, but that was reading. This stuff is getting to be very, very proficient. There's also experiments, I think they were being done the experiment that I read about was taking place between India and Scotland, where they were doing the same thing where they had a person in India looking at color sheets and pictures of different shapes. And they sent the interpreted brainwaves to Scotland, and they uploaded those into a person's brain in Scotland. And the person in Scotland was able to say what was the person in India, what they were seeing. Again, wasn't very accurate, but it showed that the potential where it was. Again, this is several years back. So I haven't been keeping up to where exactly those experiments are today. But imagine what that means for education if you can simply upload the entire knowledge of calculus into somebody's brain in 5 minutes, so that everybody's got PhD level knowledge of calculus with about a 5-minute investment. Using tools like Notebook LM, and there's a tool from Google. They started this thing. It's been released. In the United States, we have the SAT tests that almost every high school student takes. Google now has, you can take practice SAT tests. It will analyze the SAT test, figure out what all the weaknesses of that student is, and then develop a custom learning plan for that student to master all the things they were weak on relative to the SATs. So potentially using this tool, instead of paying thousands of dollars or your parents paying thousands of dollars for you to go to test preparation tutoring, it's free and you can get down to where you can pretty much ace the SATs. They also released it for the IEE, which, what does that stand for? Indian Entrance Examination. It's for the universities. It's a standard entrance exam across India. And they're making it possible that in India, anybody can learn to master those exams. They're doing it for the GRE, the MRE, eventually all the AP courses, and eventually they plan to do that for every subject. So that anybody who says, hey, I want to learn this, they have the ability to learn it. It will generate tutorials on the fly to explain to you the concepts that you need to understand to be able to accurately answer the questions. There's another project called Learn Your Way or Learn My Way, Learn Your Way, started last September from Google as well. What they're doing there is they're planning to automate all textbooks so that anybody will be able to now talk to their textbook and have their textbook talk to them, have their textbook quiz them on their understanding of all the stuff in the textbook, identify their weaknesses, overcome their weaknesses. So just think of the ramifications of this for knowledge, but not for knowledge. Any worker, you go on a job, you spend time getting trained how to do that job. Imagine now that on the job, while you're doing the job, there's cameras either in your glasses or your headband or around the area watching what you're doing, saying, stop, no, you have to do it this way. So it's correcting you all the time. I don't know if we're ever going to get to that because I don't think the humans are going to keep the job long enough for that to apply. Although I think it's available now, but in a broad sense, because Google's got another project where I forget, it's got a little 3-letter name where it's a robot arm. And that robot arm will just watch humans on other tables around it doing things. And the robot can then exactly duplicate what the humans were doing just by watching them. It will also can learn to duplicate what the human is doing just by watching YouTubes. They just have the AI watch the YouTubes, and now the AI is able to do whatever the YouTube was able to do. And the speed at which this is taking place in the hotel industries in Japan, for example, restaurants, hospitals, it's just amazing at the speed. So the bottom line is, how can we imagine that that AI is not going to supersede the knowledge and skills of humans? We have to think, what does this mean for Rotary if all small business owners and professionals no longer have an income? How many people with no income are going to join Rotary? And what if we're looking at 30 to 50% unemployment rate within 10 years? Okay. Can our society survive with a 20% unemployment rate for more than a year? So what's going to happen? What's going to happen when that happens? This is the thing Bernie Sanders is bringing up. Nobody's saying what if, right? Maybe it's not going to happen. Maybe, we're going to hit a wall. A lot of people project we can't generate enough electrical power to power the data centers that it will need to be able to provide all of this compute power.
Bill, we just had a man come on to our peacemakers circle the other day that is in Egypt, and he's American who is developed a technology that can integrate all of the knowledge of the world, including your own, and give it to people basically nearly for free. Uh, it also doesn't use the data centers that are draining the world of its water and energy. And it just has to have a small investment to be able to create the vision that's there. Uh, I'd love to be able to get you in contact with him. I thought I had sent you his information, but
Please, send it again if you did, and send me any information about that technology. But there's a technology that was introduced. I read about it for the first time this last week. They're able to create using graphene this material that can duplicate anything out there, and they spray something on it, and it becomes the equivalent of human brain cells. And it takes like 1/1,000,000th of the power of, or no, 150,000 still of the energy to compute as does our digital world. And it is able to communicate directly with human brain cells. Well, I don't know about the human brain cells. They've only tested it with mice brain cells. So, but it works with mice brain cells. And this has the potential to totally revolutionize that. So, we've got all those people that say, don't worry, because the power needs of the technology here, we're going to hit a wall, and they're not going to be able to go further. There are just too many developments that are taking place that are mitigating the power needs. Plus, if we just look at NVIDIA chips, the efficiency of NVIDIA chips increased, I think, by 1,000-fold in 1 year. That means the compute power per amount of energy needed improved by 1,000-fold in 1 year. So even though the demand is increasing by more than that right now, we can see that the extremes people are talking about are not likely to happen. So that's one thing from the energy side, and the other thing is the training. Both Google and NVIDIA have major projects to generate. We think, let's look at self-driving cars. Self-driving cars have to be able to evaluate what's ever happening around them and be able to determine what action needs to be taken, if any, for any given situation. In the beginning, that was, oh, there's something in front of me, a wall or something in front of me, I have to stop. I have to back up, I can turn to the right, I can turn to the left, and then I continue. And that was pretty much the limit. And then they started to go and say, okay, putting in more factors, more sensors that watched on the sides and here to be able to anticipate things. So the person that steps into the street without watching, that can be detected. So today, instead of limited to a couple of dozen situations, events, and knowing what to do in those events, they handle tens of thousands of events. So it's like, if any of you are familiar with computer programming, we have if-then loops, if this, do that, else do this, and so forth. And you can create entire hierarchies of that, originally you had hierarchies of maybe 10, 12 steps. And today you've got hundreds of thousands of steps, or tens of thousands of steps anyway. So today, somebody that's coming on a bicycle in from the side, it'll take avoiding action. What they did was initially they had the sensors capturing the information of what's going on around them, and they would observe the human driver. And whatever the human driver, if the human driver stepped on the brake, if they turned the steering wheel, whatever, it captured those actions. And then it was able to see, well, what was the result of those actions? Well, they did this and they crashed. They did this and it crashed into something coming on the other side. If they did this and then that, oh, it worked out okay. And that's how they were able to determine what actions should be taken in what situations. And the latency kept getting smaller and smaller so that it can come up and turn the steering wheel this way for like a millisecond and then turn it the other way. So to the point today, we look at self-driving cars and it can handle the great majority of situations. In fact, we know it handles them better than human drivers, because when San Francisco, about 2 years ago, they had some accidents there, and there was an outcry, primarily from the taxi drivers but some in the general public, and they banned the self-driving cars for a while. And then they came back out with the study, and they found that the accidents were 7 times, I think 7 times more likely to have been caused by a human driver per mile driven. This is per mile driven than the automated drivers, the autonomous drivers. They found that accidents caused by humans were 5 times more likely to cause damage to a human, injury to a human. And there was some other factor that they measured as well. So they brought them back, and they've just gotten better and better and better since then. So this is happening everywhere now. That's the way it works, is that all this agent technology, a lot of them people don't bother. They just make the agent and let it go, and it screws up and it screws up, and they say, oh, it's bad technology. But most of the ones that are being done seriously in labs, they're creating the agent technology that does something, takes certain actions, but they're tracking the actions and they're self-improving. So that yes, their initial agent description may have had an error, but then they catch it. Maybe it happens only 1 time in 10. That error causes a problem, and 9 times it doesn't. But once you do it enough times, then you're going to catch that error, and then you fix it. And this is why we see the technology growing so fast, so that, a couple of years ago, we would get accuracy rates of 28%, let's say, on certain tests and things like that. And then it grew up to be 40%. And then today, on just test type for like medical examinations or law bar exams, things like this, they're typically in the high 80s to in the 90 percentile, which is better than the average PhD student. If we get to the coding, quality of the coding, the ChatGPT 5.5, I think it jumped almost 20 points. It's up in the mid 70s now. So it went from the mid 50s up to the mid 70s. And we're seeing this continual improvement. So that says long-term, we're on a path where AI is going to exceed the average human in everything. We are also seeing that the efficiency, the Chinese, since we didn't sell them the chips, the NVIDIA chips, the best chips, they spent more time on looking at the algorithms and the processes and the inference engines to infer data out of the data that they had. And that's how we end up with things like DeepSeek, and which is almost as good as the best US models, but at like 2 to 3% the cost. And now, because they didn't have access to the chips, Huawei has been continually improving their chips, so they're almost at the same level as NVIDIA. So that just keeps improving and improving and improving. Their agent technology with Manus, if you're not familiar with a product called Manus, which is right now in contention because Meta bought Manus, the It's a Chinese company that moved its headquarters to Singapore so that they could sell themselves to Meta and to Facebook. But China is now trying to contest the sale. So, but at any rate, we can see how fast that's going. About 2 weeks ago, well, Anthropic already now, I would say for probably the better part of a year. Anthropic is Claude. Claude had the reputation as being the best coding for developing software. You just tell it what you want for an app or a website, and it'll build it for you. And it was considered to be the best. Well, something like 80% of all the latest versions of Claude, of the Anthropic tools, were developed by AI, not by humans. And this is going to increase. It's estimated that within a very short time, there's not going to be any humans that are going to really, well, we already know we don't understand how AI works. That's why that big project in Stanford University to try to figure that out. But the key thing that we're looking at is the speed that AI, every major company out there is working on having AI become self-improving. That means you run the AI double checks its own work, figures out where it's not coming up with great answers, and then it rewrites its own engine. It rewrites itself, and it gets better and better. Well, to put this in perspective, imagine, we have people who try to breed purebred dogs and animals, right? So you breed a dog. The gestation time is so many months, and then there's so long until that dog reaches maturity and can propagate further. So you might be able to go and have every couple of years a generation. So if you're trying to breed a certain characteristic, it may take you 10 years to do 5 generations. Well, they now have, with this CRISPR-9 DNA editing tool, they're able to take cells, the sperm cells and the egg cells, and they're able to merge them in a petri dish, but they're able to edit them and edit out certain traits they don't want, and I don't know if they can edit in, but they can edit out traits they don't want. And they actually cause the cells to join in a petri dish. But the interesting thing is they don't even have to wait for a birth. They just take the result of those joined cells in the petri dish, and they're able to now take those and do the same process again. So instead of needing like 2 to 3 years for each generation, they're able to do a generation in a matter of hours. So they're able to potentially do thousands of generations of evolution on biological organisms in a very, very short time. I have not been keeping up with where that's going, but that's got some scary implications on its own right. This for here, what happens if somebody really nails the self-improvement, recursive self-improvement for AI? And all of a sudden, AI is able to self-improve itself 10 times a day. Right now, it's been taking something like, I think they're down to something like 6 to 8 weeks on models. And that's like going from a ChatGPT 3.4 to 3.5. But imagine now if what we're doing per year could be done in a matter of a couple of hours. That's how we could lose control. Because if this AI is self-improving itself, how do we control what direction it's self-improving itself in a short time? So the bottom line here is, and you know, we've been at this for a while, is I think it's unrealistic to imagine that can never happen. As I said here, there's no guarantee it will happen, but there's also no guarantee it won't happen. And so what do we do if it does happen? And I go back to what we tried to do with our club, is to say that bodies like the UN have to come up with contingency plans. How are we going to help the world to transform to these changes in a peaceful manner? Especially if it's coming as fast as it's supposedly coming. Our regulatory bodies, Congresses, parliaments, and so forth, they're used to being reactive. When something happens, when they're forced to, they'll act. But the problem is, if things start happening so fast, the reaction that you're coming up with is out of date long before you ever bring it out. Right? So we've got to convince, and this is where I think Bernie Sanders is 100% right. These people need to start to be talking about this seriously. They have to seriously start to consider, what if? What are we going to do if? Are we just going to allow things to evolve so that top 1% owns everything? Because that's where we're headed. And if that happens and the top 1% owns everything, and then we decide, oh, we got to do something, so we'll tax the top 1%, you guys have to pay for the other 99% out there. Well, that top 1% is probably going to go and say, well, what's the minimum? What's the least? How do we pay the least for that 99%? And that 99% is going to be saying, how do we get a greater share? How can we allow that top 1% to be living 1,000 times better than we are? And that's going to create that tension and conflict. So I think here, my conclusion out of watching this video is we really, really have to get all of the leaders out there to really seriously say, what if? What do we do if? The self-driving car, that's exactly what they did. They went and figured out what to do if this situation happens, do this. We need our leaders to be thinking that way. But they're not going to think that way until the bulk of the population starts to think that way. Where's the plan? You know, when we look at education, just at education, we see in the United States, in New Jersey, we did that little test to see the top 10% of elementary schools have roughly 90% of kids at grade level. The bottom 10% of elementary schools have less than 10% of the students at grade level. And it's not changed in the last 20 years. So the question is, who's got the plan? Where is the plan that is going to close the gap between the bottom 10% of schools and the top 10% of schools? There's no plan. I can't find one anyway. So if we can't even make a plan how to improve our education, how do we come up with a plan to say, what are we going to do when the jobs are gone? Now, if you're thinking here, well, you know, just because it's possible that the robots can do this or do that, doesn't mean it's going to happen. Well, I encourage you to do a little research into the Xiaomi. What is it? That's XI. The Xiaomi, the cell phone manufacturer. In China, last year they opened a factory that produces a smartphone every second. Every second it spits out a smartphone. There's no humans working there. It's a lights out factory because there's no humans, so you don't need any light, you don't need heating. And they're in the process of building a car plant that will turn out cars with no humans involved in the production. So China feels, hey, we have to do this because of their one-child policy. They have a lot of elderly Chinese now, but their working age population is relatively small. And so their answer is we need to be much more productive so that that smaller workforce can generate everything that's needed by this large number of dependent population. But at the same time, we see they're able to produce a car for a fraction of the cost of what it costs to produce a car in the United States or Europe. So what happens here, that just as a side effect of what they're doing, that all of a sudden here they're offering cars for $5,000. The same car that we could go and sell for $60,000. Does that mean that every Chinese is going to be able to afford to drive a car, but not everybody in the Western world is going to be able to afford to drive a safe car? Or you're going to apply that to food, because they're also automating food production in China, even in rice paddies, that they're totally automating the growing of the rice and then the processing of the rice. So when they go and say, hey, guess what? Everybody here can eat well in China, and we've got people that are struggling in other parts of the world. Are we going to say no because we want human workers to do all the work, even though they hate doing it? That workers in America and Europe, they have to work so many hours a day to be able to get what somebody in China has just for being alive. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, and we can't leave it, as I say, to the individual countries, because if we do that, we're going to find the global South is going to be out there in the cold, because once we get to the idea that the average person's not going to be able to make a living working because they won't be able to compete, will the people in the northern hemisphere decide they're going to share their benefits? If it's after the fact, it's much harder to give up something you've got than to give up something you haven't gotten yet. So these are some things. So I thought, as I said here, the idea that this topic, I felt this topic was so important, because it's something we had talked about for a while. Joan, you might want to kick in because you were part of the discussions we were having back in the fall about the Doha conference, trying to get this on the agenda there. The speed with which this is happening is coming so fast now that if we don't get and start people talking about it now, we are going to be in deep, deep trouble. Comments, anyone?
I am very happy that I was able to join you today, and I look forward to following up and reading more about what you have done in the past and being in attendance at your meeting. This has been very informative to me. I am the president of my club here in New York, and we are in District 7230. But we will be in touch with you.
Which club in New York? Which club in New York is it?
This is the eClub of Vision. It's an online club.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And our members are all over also.
Yes, and it's interesting because we did an analysis about eClubs. I don't know if you attended the Rotary online session about 3-4 weeks ago for eClubs.
No, I wasn't aware of that one.
Oh, okay. So they've got a person now in Rotary about eClubs, but it looks to be about 2/3 to 3/4 of eClubs are just they're local clubs, just like regular clubs, but they just don't want to go and spend money to have lunch or something. So they meet online. but about a third of the Rotary eClubs, because the fellowship doesn't work the same way, and because your community is global rather than just being a local community, you tend to be cause related. So that's what we're really hoping to do, working together with this central office in Rotary, is to create some kind of a platform for those e-clubs that are global cause related to come together to collaborate on these kinds of issues. So
Yes.
you're welcome. Glad you could
Beautiful.
make it.
We'll be keeping in touch. And I
Good.
look forward to having access so that I can share this video with not only my club, but in the district at large.
Okay, great. Yes, that'll be great. Anyone else? Okay, I would say here then those of you who did not get a chance to watch the video in advance that was in the invitation, please do so, and we will continue next week with our presentation of the projects that we believe could be the kinds of projects that will help us mobilize a large share of the world population, working together with the United Nations. And Hugh, just you may not be aware, the past vice chair of the NGO Committee for Education, Learning, and Literacy at the UN. So I was living just outside of New York until just recently. And so I was in New York quite a bit. Okay, so at any rate, then, if there's no further comments, we are just 2 minutes under 2.5 hours, which makes this one of our shorter meetings. Yes, what was that? Aliyah, did you say something?
No, I was just chuckling,
Oh, okay.
but it's a short meeting.
Okay, so then thank you, everyone. And I'm going to try to go and see if I can't pull together an outline of the major advances that AI has made over the last 2 months, let's say 3 months, because people who have not looked, I look here because of my medical situations right now. I'm not having as much time, and I'm finding here that in 1 week I can get so far behind. It's almost impossible to catch up. And so I'm working on seeing about putting together an AI agent that is going to do the work for me of tracking everything that's happening and providing summaries for us. So we'll work on that. Okay, other than that though, we are now, it's close enough. I now declare this meeting on 2 May 2026 to be closed. Thank you all. Bye now.
Take care.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.